Hello, and welcome to Little Bangor Stories. I'm Anne-Marie Foster, and I've lived in Bangor, County Down all my life. Our city hugs a part of the southern side of Belfast Lough, and sometimes the winds and waves along our seafront throw up the unexpected.
When Margaret and I got married, the very day and night we came home, there was a storm, and it went right over the building. So the waves were hitting the wall and climbing, and we found crabs in the back garden of that building.
That's Jim Boal, the subject of this episode. He's in his 90s and grew up in Bangor before training as a pharmacist and opening his first chemist shop on Queen's Parade in the late 1950s, when everyone took a camera on holiday.
The biggest sale of all was films, still box cameras, and people would come into the camera and said, "Could you take that one out and put a new one in?" They never even do it themselves in case they do something wrong. This is not exaggeration. I would have sold maybe about between 80 to 100 a day.
But he was also part of a group which worked with young people in the area. They even paid for premises out of their own pockets. That place, the Grapevine, was somewhere teenagers could meet. And along the way, he changed how government funded youth work.
I said, "I've been to the education board, and they said they can't help because I don't have a membership." And I said, the whole strength of the Grapevine is these are people that don't want to belong to the system or a system. And I said, it doesn't make them bad people or anything. And a lot of them are very suspicious of do-gooders. So I said, if we ever start sending up a membership, we're in trouble. They accepted that there's a change in society and they'd have to make provision for it.
So let's begin. I met up with Jim and one of his daughters, Karen, early in 2025. He had his scrapbooks as aide-memoirs. Not that he needed them, as you'll hear when I asked about his first job as a pharmacist in Bangor 70 years ago.
Population 48,000, 17 chemists. In the main street alone, at the top of halls, across the road is Bombers. Then diagonally at the corner, the co-op just opened in the Bank of Ireland building. Then across the road, diagonally and beside the Ulster Bank, was Bob McCutcheon's. Further down is where I started out after I qualified as John Gray. And across the road from John Gray was Forrests. Down below that was Hannah's. And then straight across the road from Hannah's, there was Addie's.
A few years later, Jim opened his own shop at 37 Queen's Parade. The three-storey building is still there. Queen's Parade at the time was a wide street that skirted the coastline, with hotels, shops, even a little cinema on one side and the sea wall on the other. The building is very derelict now, but at the time, Jim and his new wife Margaret sank their honeymoon savings into starting the business and lived above the shop. What was it like on Queen's Parade in those days?
Well,
now,
I had...
We can remember walking along and getting soaked, and sometimes getting deliberately soaked.
Oh, well, that was...
But was it? I mean, was it a good place to trade from? Or?
My business was bad in the winter, especially if there's storms. When Margaret and I got married, came home, the very day and night we came home, there was a storm, and it went right over the building. So the waves were hitting the wall and climbing, and we found crabs in the back garden of that building. And they didn't walk round, definitely not. They came by flight. And so we had starfish and all the rest in the back garden, 3 floors up. And then we into the lounge, and there was a lovely new carpet because we were new married. And there was a damp spot in the middle. And I looked up, and we had the glass bowl that we had in those days with the light in it, and it was full of water.
That seawater, or was that rain?
Seawater.
Seawater.
And it was full of that.
In the summertime, it must have been a brilliant place to have a shop.
In the summer, it was. I was open to 9 o'clock every night, and it was busy. We weren't far away from the war. You know, you're inclined to think the passage of time, but it's 1945 and here am I, 1959. It was very, very, very busy for a very, very short time. We had the 12th of July, the 2 holidays, but the same people are coming every year, and the sort of things that we sold out. I mean, I look on now, so much rubbish, but it was exciting after the war. We sold sunglasses, and they were made out of plastic, you know, just with a bit of wire stuck to it. And they were in pink and blue and green. I mean, they were no use for sun, but they were called sunglasses. It is a happy time whenever, you know, after the war. And the biggest sale of all was films. Still box cameras. And people would come in with a camera and said, could you take that one out and put a new one in? They never even do it themselves in case they do something wrong. And then it went for processing. In fact, the shop I took over had a wee factory at the back for developing. I didn't want to get involved in it.
For people maybe listening, these are cameras that you opened the back of them.
Yeah.
You pulled the film
Pulled
out
out
a little bit
roll.
from a little cylinder.
We-
And the worry was always that if you pulled it out too much,
That's right.
So no wonder people would come in and ask you to do it for them.
And no, this is not exaggeration. I would have sold maybe about between 80 to 100 a day. Films. And people would buy, you know, they'd buy 3 or 4, and then they'd come in and say, "Will you take that and put that?" And of course, I knew that they'd bought it from me anyway.
As you say, colour film was coming in, and that must have been, I mean, I'm guessing that must have been a big part of any chemist's turnover, because...
Oh, it was.
I mean...
Nobody
even
else went for
Yeah.
the chemist is where you bought your camera.
And where you took
There was
your...
no other-
D&P, development and processing.
Yeah, you took your film back and you left it in,
Uh-huh.
and you got your wee slip, and then the great excitement
Yeah.
of going back to the chemist
That's right.
and getting your photographs.
Exactly.
So things were going well, and his own passion for photography and sound made his shop a mecca for fans of this brand new technology. And 2 doors down, at number 39, a huge fish and chip shop and cafe was closing down. Well, tell me this then. So you're in the first little shop in Queen's Parade,
Yeah.
and then you moved to the larger shop, which was the former Caproni's.
It was the previous Caproni's.
Now, which came first? Did you decide, oh, let's just have a bigger shop and then think, what can I fill it with? Or did you know that you were going to go for hi-fi?
This is a small shop.
Yes.
And so I didn't have enough space. And then people wanted to put music on, sound on their cine film. And it is complicated. It wasn't easy. But I had to then learn out how to build audio equipment like amplifiers and extra speakers, because people wanted somewhere else. They didn't want it just sitting beside the projector. And so, again, space. So I went for it, and I got an agency for Bangor Olufsen. And it's the only agency in the whole of Ireland. They never ever appointed an agent, except for Morris Solomon of the gramophone shop in Belfast in Donegal Avenue. And he was a astute man after the war. He saw what was this Danish stuff was coming, and he went and he did a deal that he would market it in Ireland, north and south, and he got that. And then Bangor Olufsen started to take on, and they decided they were not going to have any agents. You'd have to buy direct from Bangor Olufsen. So he allowed me to be a branch of his own shop. Then it had nothing to do with him. I bought from him like a wholesaler. Things were getting bigger and bigger and bigger, because I had to have engineers, electronic, Dennis Brown of Albert Street. I sent him on a course to Denmark and he was delighted because he was a bright guy, and so he got the knowledge at no cost. So he did all my repairs.
And this is dated June 1973, and that is really when people were starting to become very, very interested in sound and colour film
TV.
And graphic equalisers and all. It wasn't just a box in the corner that you turned.
I didn't want to be dropping words like that.
No. But you were just starting to ride that wave of the interest that people were showing in audio equipment.
Well, after I got that photograph taken, I said, "I'm away, folks. Bye-bye." And I hammered it off and up to Belfast to see my new baby that had just been born. And Margaret was in the Royal, and the baby was born at about 11 o'clock, but I was in the middle of this. And I had to charge up.
So they had IJ Boal
Richard was born. That shop was open on the day he was born.
Oh my goodness. So that's fantastic. But even then, everything was changing. An IRA bomb attack on the town's main street around the corner had meant that large parts of the commercial centre were now closed to traffic and shoppers couldn't park outside businesses.
Why I finished up in the small shop in Abbey Street was when the bombs went on Main Street, and on the Monday, by that stage the Main Street was wrecked, and so the only way through the town was down Grace Hill along Queen's Parade, no parking.
Yeah.
And suddenly it was like somebody had switched the lights out. Because I counted on people being able to park outside my door. They never stayed long, but at that stage the only place was parking on the road. But you could do it, and so that had brought more business than I actually realised until that Monday. And we struggled for a while, and then eventually I thought the shop in Abbey Street, Mr. Flanagan was retiring. His brother-in-law's my accountant, and he said, "You don't think of moving up there?" And in fact, he said to me, he said, "Jim, the way things are at the moment, he says it's going down all the time." He said, I don't know what you're going to do." But he said he made a suggestion about me moving there. And
of course, Abbey Street was close to the relatively new health centre.
Yeah, but at that stage, I purely just it is survival. I had to think of what am I going to do next, and thankfully they had the two shops running together for about 18 months or so, nearly 2 years. Whenever we sold the shop, I moved up and ran it from then afterwards. And I hadn't the space in that. It's a very small shop. So I had to decide to concentrate the nature of the business. And I got rid of a lot of the cosmetics and one thing and another, and specialised on medical only. Let's say we provided the whole of Bangor for the like of post-operative stuff, stomach care and all the rest of it. I had over 100 customers.
Not maybe as glamorous or exciting as your audio equipment, but still a very important
for
service.
For me, it's more satisfying.
Yeah.
Because even though I was doing all this stuff, at the end of my heart was still in the pharmacy side and that side of it.
Yeah.
Not in the other developed because it just developed. So I was quite happy when I moved to Abbey Street and got rid of all of the photographic and I sold to Chris, who was my manager of the place. He loved it, and he moved to High Street. So it was traded as Boal Audiovisual for years.
It's the 1980s now, and with his third shop comes a real return to pharmacy for Jim, using all his knowledge and inventiveness for the people of Bangor.
I did a couple of diploma things and started lecturing at postgrad students purely as a community pharmacist. That element of everything we were doing. So I would give talks on diabetes care and stomach care, asthma and so on. So this was a whole new era, and even the doctors, I'd got to know them all. They would ring me up and say, Jim, we've got a problem with Mrs. So-and-so, have you any suggestions? And they would suck me in. I'm not an expert in anything. I've got a wee bit of everything. And I was able to help them and they'd help me. But as I say, I serviced all the doctors in Bangor, and I started to see the nursing homes. And that became a big thing. And again, legal requirements. So I wrote a manual for the training of nurses in the nursing homes, and we then were supplying them, and so it took a totally different direction.
Is this in the 80s?
From the pharmacy that I started off, when we were weighing out things and measuring, and suddenly that had all gone. When I went to Gray's in Main Street, it's a different system in way in. It is an apprentice degree. You had to do 4 years as an apprentice working for a pharmacist, and your time off. In your final year, you're a full-time student. But when it came Christmas and holidays, you had to go back into the shop and help in the summer in those times. But you got paid a wee bit, got about £3 a week in the last year. But anyway, it was something.
Was it different being in Queensparade to Abbey Street? How had the whole thing changed in those years?
The whole medical relationship between doctor and pharmacist and all those things were changing. We had been educated in pharmacy, and we could see where it was going. I mean, a big piece of my education in pharmacy was the subject which you don't even hear of, called pharmacognosy. And pharmacognosy is the medical plant and animal products that produce chemicals that have medical function. The simplest of them all was, let's say, Foxglove, and from that we got digitalis, which stopped heart throb, and that was a breakthrough. And then they discovered how to synthesize that, and didn't have to go out into the fields cutting the digitalis. And slowly, all those things that are in those happy drawers, they're not needed anymore. Once they knew what was in the stuff, they were able to synthesize it chemically. And so everything was changing. And so manufacturing things slowly disappeared. There was still a wee bit of it even when I left, but not very much. It stood me in fear because I knew what happened with foods and products, and I could bake or cook or do anything because I understand the materials.
So you'd be good on the Great British Bake Off then, would you?
Yes. So I feel that when I do various things, the girls would understand what I'm trying to say. I'm not boasting. All of my generation would have been able to do that. But it still isn't.
Did you ever get around to making your own rosehip syrup?
Oh, no, but I made all my own cough mixtures and teething mixtures. I've got a whole brace of them. And people stop me in the main street and said, I'll say, well, how's wee Shirley now? Wee Shirley's got a baby of her own. And, some realize it's not even that generation, it's another one.
But here we need to rewind a little, because another passion of the Boal family had also come to fruition with that final shop move. So you're in Queensparade for a little while, and when did you fully leave Queensparade and move up to Abbey Street?
78.
78. And then is that when that building became the YMCA?
I was running a youth club in the town called the Grapevine on Queensparade. And do you remember hearing that name?
I do indeed.
And it took up a lot of time, but it was very rewarding. The youth work, I came through so many Protestant churches the way they are, BB and all that nonsense. And once a year, the congregation meets and all organisations give a note of what they have been doing. And there was one of the senior elders, he was taking wee notes. And he got up and he made his wee talk at the end, sort of said about how much excited it was to have all these young people. I had been taking note of them as well, and he said we have something like 600 young people in the organisations. And then I suddenly realised, no, we haven't. We've only got 300, twice over, 2 organisations. So they've been counted twice. Mm-hmm. And it's a congregation of 800 families. Where are the rest? And that's why I then, with a friend, Alan Crichton, 2 of us went out around the Ava and all the bars and all to see where the young people were, and we found that's where they were. Mm-hmm. They didn't want to go into these places anymore. And then we also saw that there was just a rumbling of the troubles at that time. Back to 1966, 68 things started to boil up, but 66 it hadn't quite. And we just didn't know what to do. And so as a group, we said, let's find out, are we bluffing ourselves? So I got people that young people of my own age, and we thought this was a clever thing to do. On a Sunday night, we would go down to the Queen's Parade and went into the Crystal coffee bar type place. You know, people went in, they'd buy their drinks and that. So we would sit down, and people would start talking to them, and then that's when I discovered that I was right about what we were, because there were a lot of kids that went to Sunday schools, never went to church now. Mm-hmm. And so the statistics were telling lies, and that's when we thought we'll have to get some safe place where young people come in, because Mr. Handley, he was brilliant. He loved Sunday night. The kids were delighted. We were talking. We did a census form and with questions, but they were only a means of getting them to talk. Mm-hmm. And it worked very, very well. And he was over the moon about that. And he used to say that was the best night of the week. And then we realised he had to close at 10 o'clock. And that's when things were really hotting up. And we were having to send bye-bye now. And we thought we'd have to have some place that we can, our own place. And we got this place in George Allport's Arcade. And we always drew a line at 1 o'clock. Because the kids, a lot of them were just sleeping on to midday. We had to get up.
Was that still the Grapevine then? Was that the origins of the Grapevine? And then it moved into your
YMCA
building.
Yeah. We started up, and I have to say, the Stormont were brilliant with me. We have a problem here. I said, I have to pay rates for a start. Paying out of our own pockets. I brought a team together. And that's how we kept it going, purely out of our own pocket. And I said, we need a bit of help. And I said, I've been to the Education Board, and they said they can't help because I don't have a membership. And I said, the whole strength of the Grapevine is these are people that don't want to belong to the system or a system. And I said, it doesn't make them bad people or anything. But I said, for whatever reasons, they don't want to be, and they're very, very suspicious. A lot of them are very suspicious of do-gooders. So I said, if we ever start sending up a membership, we're in trouble. They accepted that there's a change in society and they'd have to make provision for it. So the building was lying empty there. I had it on the market, and YMCA guy, Michael Parrott, was chairman of the YMCA in Belfast, and he came down and spoke to me. He says, Jim, we want to open in Bangor. And he said, do you think your team would become the YMCA of Bangor? And we discussed all that, and eventually he said, we want to be on the seafront because we know that's where the young people are. And at that time, anyway, this was the plan. So we did an agreement, and they bought the property from me, the YMCA, and which was a great relief because, I still had debts to the bank, and every now and again they'd rumble, and we were able to clear it all.
That's fantastic.
You know, so that
but at the
was
same time, then Bangor got a brilliant facility for young people on.
Oh yes.
On Queen's Parade, even though I'm guessing from my own memory, not too long after that, the work started then on Queen's Parade in the early 80s.
Right.
Yeah,
that's right.
And things changed again, but still, it was fantastic premises to have.
Fantastic premises. The YMCA went very, very well, and then you know I gave it 30 years working with it, and I was tired now. You know, the family were very patient with me. And I don't remember any of them saying, and Margaret, of course, was involved. It was very much a family business.
What a life. From picking rose hips in fields around Bangor as a child for the war effort to a successful and much-loved pharmacist and a determined and compassionate advocate for young people. Thanks for sharing it all, Mr. Boal. And thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this little Bangor story. There are more to come. Have a look at our website, littlebangorstories.co.uk, for information and contact details. Perhaps you've a wee tale to tell. We're also on Blue Sky, Instagram, Facebook and X if you want to follow. Until the next time.